Hello, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Thursday, July 25th, the final show of the week. Welcome wherever you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or X or Rumble or Twitch or Telegram or shadowdavis.com. I want you to like and share. Let's get this out to as many people as we possibly can. We have a very important show tonight with Kelly Lynn Pirie of the Detrans Alliance of Canada. She is going to tell us her story, and we're going to talk about this whole transing thing that's been going on for the last few years. Very hard, you might agree with me, very hard these last couple of years. And people, it looks like anyway, even the normies are waking up to this, especially this past year. And there have been some communities across our country even, and many in the United States, that have canceled their Pride celebrations based on the fact that people are actually standing up and saying, all right, that's enough. That's enough. We understand they're there. We don't need to celebrate every second. Every door we walk through has got a trans flag hanging there. And where's the Canadian flag? Where's the U.S. flag? Where's my provincial flag? Where's my municipal flag? Where's the flag of my favorite football or hockey team? No, I got to see this thing, which changes every 2 days apparently, adding new colors, new symbols. I don't even know who it represents anymore, all the people involved. So Kelly is going to enlighten us on a few things that we might not know tonight. Plus, it's very important because Kelly has been through this whole transing thing herself and is now detransing. She was born a woman. We're going to at least try to get a look at us, how we look to them on the other side of things. Are we crazy demons to them? That's interesting. It's very difficult to get that perspective from where we all sit, especially with the feelings we have about this whole thing. Hello, Rhonda in Labrador City. Dawson is watching tonight in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. Wayne is watching on X. Wayne and Patty are watching from Norwich. Hello, Tony in Calgary. Bren is watching tonight in beautiful Port Elgin. Christine is in the Hammer. Hello, Linda, watching in Waterloo, Ontario. And Diane's watching in very hot Regina. Eddie is in Stonewall, Lorna. Hello in Southeast Saskatchewan. Heather watching in Edmonton. Laura's watching in Sherwood Park, Alberta. Oh, by the way, I do want to mention the fire that is burning still around Jasper and took out, they say, 30 to 50, potentially 30 to 50% of the buildings in the town site of Jasper. Let's throw it up on the screen right now here. This is from the CBC, and first of all, let me just say this, that, and I hope I speak for all of you guys who are watching this right now, and I know there's already a lot of theories about what this might be, considering it's federal and not provincial land. It is a national park after all. But all of the people who lost their lives, their livelihoods, their homes, their belongings, some things that maybe they've had in their lives for 40, 50, 60 years, those things have gone up in smoke quite literally. And I want everybody to know, anybody who lost anything of sentimental value or, monetary, that I and my entire group of viewers, my entire community here at the Shadow Davis Show, want you to know that we are with you all the way. And if there's anything we can do, we will try to do that. Right now, we're sending goodwill and love out to you right now. We know that firefighters are coming in from all across the province and probably all across Canada right now. Danielle Smith is marshalling a crew, and she has been on site surveying the damage herself. Not that premiers can really do much, except provide emotional support for the people, which she is there doing. Here's a problem I'm having with the left-wing corporate media. I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. They're calling it a wildfire. Just like last year and the year before, oh, these wildfires, the wildfires, the wildfires. And wildfire to me denotes something that just sets spontaneously. Like all of a sudden there's this massive fire burning. It's going to take out an entire town site. And that's the language of the left. That is designed to get you thinking that it's wild. It's spontaneously started, probably due to climate change. But last year, we know there were several people in Alberta and elsewhere across the country and in the United States as well who were arrested and charged for arson based upon starting forest fires, intentional forest fires. This could have been accidental. This could have been lightning strike. We don't know. None of the left-wing corporate media seem to want to talk about it right now. I've tried to get a hold of some people I know in Jasper. Obviously, they are in the middle of everything right now and can't talk, but we will try to get some people on the show in the next couple of nights, hopefully, and hear what the real damage is going around the left-wing corporate media. But nobody is investigating as to how this started, at least not yet, because everybody is concerned about safety, getting people out of their homes into evacuation sites. But let's not use the Marxist language here. Let's not use the term wildfire because we don't know what kind of fire this is yet. And of course, the left-wing corporate media always takes the opportunity to jump on the climate change bandwagon. The Shadow at Night live stream is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, canadanosilver.ca. All kinds of great products on that website, including the Nano Silver Gel, the toothpaste, the immune gummies, and you can find them all at reasonable prices, all made with natural ingredients and the power of silverceutical technology at canadanosilver.ca. Again, that is canadanosilver.ca as well. You can find retail locations all across the country. You hit that tab in the upper right-hand corner. It shows you where all the retail locations in Canada are, all 30 plus. I think there's 34 of them now. And if you would like to become a retailer of those awesome products, get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at canadanosilver.ca. Again, that is canadanosilver.ca. Let's bring on our guest tonight. Well, first, let's go ahead and read about her. This comes from the DetransAllianceCanada.com website. My name is Kelly. My legal name is Kenneth. I am my mother's baby girl and my father's only daughter. I was born in BC, Canada. After my mother married an American, I grew up in small-town USA. Subsequent to their divorce, Mom moved back to Canada with us, where I graduated high school, acquired a post-secondary education, worked in a wide array of professions. I first encountered trans ideology in 2002, succumbed to the enchantment of transitioning female to male in 2004, started testosterone in 2005, had a hysterectomy in 2006, a bilateral mastectomy in 2008. My disenchantment with genderology, as she calls it here, as a religious movement, began in 2010. I fled from Vancouver's gender scene to return to long-haul trucking in early 2011, working in such a male-dominated profession, finally opened my eyes to the differences between men and women. Attending the Vancouver CPATH conference in 2017 was my first introduction to the manner in which genderology, driven by queer theory, had taken over transition-specific healthcare. The COVID-19 lockdowns changed everything, and Kelly and I had a good talk about all of this yesterday, and we barely scratched the surface. Here is Kelly Pirie right now. Hello, Kelly. Sorry, thank you for coming on tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to be on with us tonight.
Hi, Shadow. Thank you very much for having me.
So let's talk about you and what you've been through and why you were driven to genderology back in the early 2000s. What happened to you as a child?
When I was less than 3 years old, my mother made the poor parenting decision to marry a convicted pedophile. And, let me shut this off. Sorry. He began to sexually interfere with me from the beginning of their relationship. So my understanding of myself as a girl was very much impacted by his choices, by his perversions. So I grew up thinking I would have been better, or I would have been safer had I been born a boy. because I didn't see boys getting sexually exploited the manner in which I was exposed to that being done to girls, or on the instances where I was exposed to. Um, it always seemed that the males were safer than the females. Um,
Was that something that you came up with on your own, or was it discussion? I mean, you were very young when this happened. So, did you have discussion with any adults about this or any friends at all?
as an adult, I've talked to therapists about it and stuff, and I've talked to my minister about it. As a child, this idea that boys had it better just slowly developed over time because always girls were exploited. Um, and I sometimes saw boys being protected. I sometimes saw boys as my understanding of it was that they had some sort of control, they had some sort of agency, whereas a girl, it felt like we had no control, no agency. I didn't have, I had a child's understanding of what was going on. Um, Between 4 and 8, he would take me to what I call pedophile parties. So instances where other parents were bringing their daughters and children and doing the things they did. Um, After 8 years old, I was considered a credible witness down in the United States, so no longer going to the parties. Now he had clientele who wanted to have sex with children, and I was the child that he sold. And that so what I saw as I got older, my experiences changed, but it really nestled in this idea that girls are exploited, girls are weak, girls are vulnerable. So I always understood that I was a girl. I developed this belief that I would have been better off, I would have been safer had I been a boy. And I was 5 years old when a cousin talks about how he was blown away because Gene handed me a joint and I knew how to smoke it already. Like I knew how to
You,
take it
you,
out.
you were how old at this stage?
I was 5 years old at that time.
Wow.
So that was one of the ways he controlled me was through alcohol and various types of drugs. Um, so when I got into my 30s and I sobered up in 2002, I crashed hard into a reality in which it felt like I was very unsafe as a female because I had always used alcohol just as a buffer zone between me and reality, right? Just to make it better. If it wasn't alcohol, it was marijuana, but both of them did the same thing for me. They kind of took down my hypervigilance. So I wasn't aware of or reactive to the manner in which people were sexualizing me. I mean, I'm not saying it was a good thing. I was raped as an adult because I wasn't being aware of my surroundings. Um, but with the drugs, it felt like it was okay. So being 2 years sober,
Wait a minute, Kelly. How long were you addicted to these things? Was it like a 20-year space or longer?
2002, so I would have been in my, I think I was 35 when I got sober for the last time. I tried several times. Like I was 18 years old the first time I got sober for I think 9 months, maybe 10 months. And then I relapsed. Then I entered into a stage of what they call binge drinking. So I would go 3 to 6 weeks without drinking. Then I would drink heavily, and then I'd be drinking heavily every weekend. Uh, when I was in college in the late 80s, I thought I just didn't have what it took to maintain a straight A average. It turned out that what would happen was I would spend the first 6 to 8 weeks until midterms sober. So I would do really good in my studies. I would celebrate my midterms by getting drunk, and then I'd be getting drunk every other weekend until finals. So of course, my GPA I was a straight A student pretty much when I was sober going to university. So it
Wow.
made quite a difference. Yeah.
So when you finally got sober, and this is something that a lot of people are unaware of, I've spent my life around people who have been, I don't like to use the term victim, but they have been addicted to one thing or another, whether it's drugs or alcohol or both. And so I personally know from going to, I don't know, dozens or hundreds even of Al-Anon meetings, how to deal with that. And what happens to an addict when they finally are able to get that monkey off their back. They're looking for something to replace it, right? And sometimes that's not a good thing.
Yeah, I was desperate to put anything besides God into that God-sized hole in my heart. And the other thing that I had going on was I was almost 11 months in women's support recovery. I qualified for almost a year of government-sponsored inpatient treatment. My not fitting in with the women. So when I was talking to my drug and alcohol counselor about that, and then I started talking about, gender stuff, like I don't feel comfortable as a woman. I used to always think it was better to be a boy. She was an affirmations only model, so she spoke into that, well, of course, the reason you're uncomfortable in a women's support recovery house is because you never really were a woman. No, the reason I was uncomfortable in a women's support recovery house is because I am different. I'm weird, I'm strange, I'm different, and those are my character strengths, and that it is good to be different, and it is good to be okay with being different. But I was desperately trying to fit myself into the mold that other women seem to fit into so easily. And I became a tangled, mangled, bloody emotional mess. So, this idea that living as a man, I would be comfortable. And then, of course, it's peer counseling, it's peer support, it's peer. So it's a bunch of people who are also desperately thinking that this is the solution. So you've got all these people going, this is the solution, this is working. Oh, this step didn't work for you, but the next step will.
Kelly, you said moments ago an affirmations only model.
Yes.
What is that? That's somebody who can only say, "Oh yeah, you've got to transition."
That is a model of therapy that does not recognize in any way the therapeutic value of no.
So is it the therapist that will bring up the transition idea to the client, or is it like the first time the client sits down and says, I think I'd have been happier being a woman or a man or whatever it is? And that's when that counselor, that affirmations only counselor, sees that door crack open and they jump?
From that point in time, she simply affirmed that my living as a man would fix everything I was awkward with, everything I was uncomfortable with. That my challenges living with other women was because I wasn't really a woman. My awkwardness in social situations was because I was seen as a female, but I really understood that I was a man. So it is about affirming this wrong. It wasn't really born in the wrong body at that time. It was more of I had a man's soul that was in a female body, and my discomfort and my feeling awkward and strange and weird was because my male soul wanted to be affirmed and seen as a man. And it was the dissonance of living in this female body being seen as female that was causing all of this pain and discomfort. And
was there a part of you that was saying, this is all so dicked up, man? I mean, I can't even believe I'm talking about this stuff. Because as you pointed out earlier in the show, you always knew you were a girl.
I so desperately wanted to be done with therapy. Like 10 and a half months of inpatient drug and alcohol treatment, trauma therapy, alcohol and drug therapy, like therapy after therapy after therapy. And this is like, you do this and you won't need therapy anymore, right? And it was like, yeah, okay, I will be done with therapy. So I drank the Kool-Aid hard, and every once in a while I'd spit it up a bit. When I spit it up the first time, it was like, oh, that's internalized transphobia. And that would have been when I was talking about how, like, I never felt a need to force people to call me Kenneth. I never felt a need to force people to call me he. If somebody referred to me as Kelly, if some people still referred to me as she. My sister always called me her baby sister, throughout it all, and I didn't have a problem with that. I was like, well, she's my sister. This is how she sees me. What does how she sees me have to do with who I am? So I was told that that was internalized transphobia, that I hadn't fully accepted myself as male, and that as I learned to accept myself, that I would become more upset about this stuff and I would start correcting these people. And the best thing for me to do is just not to have anything to do with anyone who wasn't affirming my process. I mean, I disappeared from my family's life for almost 2 years during the early part of the process. I really came back into their lives after I'd had the hysterectomy.
So how long was it between you finally deciding, because you're in therapy, you wanted to get out, you said, and I'm sure that you would have done anything at that point, because it sounds like to me is that you were trapped in a cult and you were doing what you could to get away from the cult, but you had to transform into their version of what you should be in order to do that. I know how weird that sounds, but you make the decision to go ahead and transition. How long between that decision and your first surgery was it?
Oh, it was so hyper focused because at that time they had what we call barriers to care. So it was get a carry letter, it was get your 6 months in to be able to get referred to get your wrong sex hormones, it was get the appointment to get the wrong sex hormones, then it was get assessed for your first surgery. I was always hyper focused on the next step in the process, and that really helps too. Like I li- I live with, well, for lack of a better word, depression. Um, so being hyper focused on hop through this next hoop, hop through this next hoop, hop through this next hoop, you could put all of the self doubt and all of the negative talk that comes with what the fuck are you doing aside by hyper focusing on the next step. And I was also, I was working full time and I was completing my university degree at the same time as all of this other stuff happened. So I always had something to hyper focus on. I was either hyper focusing on being a straight A student, writing an essay, preparing for the next step in my transition. I got really involved in trans advocacy. I'm not proud of any of the stuff I did. It's part of my history. So
What did you do?
I was involved with getting the female genital mutilation surgery approved for MSP funding in BC.
Wow.
Yeah, the doctors weren't sending in referral requests to MSP. They were like, well, the surgery isn't approved, therefore there's no point in sending in the request. So I explained to them after consulting with a lawyer that they just needed to start sending in the requests so that the possibility of a human rights complaint would exist, and that then actual legal proceedings could happen. And eventually enough women had a doctor send in the request that BC MSP agreed to fund that surgery. Once BC MSP agreed to fund that surgery, I forget which province stepped up afterwards, but it was like a dominoes effect.
Let me
And
ask you, I mean, this is back in what, 2005, 2006, thereabout, right?
2006 to 2009, I was involved in that process. Like, it was a multi-year process. It was 2016, I think, when MSB and BC finally was like, okay, the magic number has been hit. We'll fund this process.
So
And
let's
then
go
it was
back. Let's go back to your transition process and your counseling process, which, well, let's say 20 years ago. Were there as many people involved in all of this stuff back then as there are today, and we just didn't know about it?
No, nowhere.
And when I
near
talk about people, I mean, I'm talking about advocacy groups, I'm talking about funding, I'm talking about anybody who's involved in any of these clinics now. I mean, it's way bigger now. It's become a large industry.
Correct. It has become a money-making proposition for people. Like Dr. Wallace Wong, who transitions children now. When I was connected with him back in 05, 06, 07, he was saying that there is no such thing as a trans child. Now he has somewhere near 1,000 children on his client list that he is actively in some way transitioning.
How do these people, like, I mean, do they have some kind of awakening one morning? They get up out of bed and go, there are trans people, and they start doing this stuff, or is it strictly for money? And if so, I wonder how they live with themselves.
It seems to be a slow turning up of the heat a little bit more every day. My not being involved in the process from 2011 to 2017 is what really allowed me to see just how crazy it got when I attended the CPATH conference in 2017 in Vancouver. I had heard about people raising their children to have no gender. Actually seeing what that looked like, attending that conference, there was a couple there who had a young child, and they're like, "Oh yes, no, we're not raising it to have a gender. We're going to let it grow up and choose." And people were like, as if that was the sanest thing that two people raising a child could say, and that just, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. That's when I began to believe that the things that my oldest brother, who's a Christian, who had really been seeing Soji, was telling me were true. And then I spoke with my friend Aaron Kimberly, who ran Gender Dysphoria Alliance when it existed. And Aaron's going, yeah, it's crazier than what your brother has told you. And that's when I got to a process going, I can't simply sit here and go, I did something and it was absolutely a train wreck in my life. Like, I left Vancouver knowing that transitioning had not helped, that I was still grappling with all of the same internal emotional challenges I had when I started transitioning, and that transitioning was supposed to fix it.
Kelly, was it a slow realization for you? This is the moment that you decided, whoa, this is all too effed up for me. I'm not doing this anymore. When you heard that people were raising their kids to be non-binary, or was it like a slow sort of process for you to finally realize, grasp, understand, and then get out?
It was a 1-year process, 2017 to 2018. And 2018, I was like, I can't be associated with this anymore. I can't. I don't know where I'm going to go from where I've gone. I have to openly start talking about regretting transitioning. And Aaron Kimberly, my friend, was the first person I talked to about the fact that, you know what, I regret transitioning. This did not help me. And I've got to find some way. Because WPATH keeps talking about how rare transition regret is. How it's like less than 1% of 1% regret doing this. Well, it's easy to, when you don't count suicide as regret, it's easy to say something is incredibly rare, especially when the person who has experienced that depth of regret is not around to speak to the depth of regret they've experienced. And the majority of people who regret their transition left completely. They just disappeared. Um, and WPATH in no way made any attempt to track 100% of a population as far as outcomes went. The other thing they've hyper focused on doing is keeping their follow up research at under 10 years, under 5 years, under 2 years. So
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I mean, if that's the case, then how can they get up in front of people and say it's less than 1% of 1% of 1% of people who regret the transition and want to change back? How can they even have the nerve to say that?
The same way they have the nerve to say that the CAS report is unscientific, when WPATH itself had several internal research reviews done that said that, and their internal reviews said that transitioning children does not help. And what they did was the best they could to bury and suppress that. That's coming out in the lawsuits down in the States right now. WPATH will tell any lie to promote its agenda. And it seems like no lie is too big of a lie. And they, in the WPATH files, it came out that they know there's a link between women taking testosterone and liver cancer. Like, they sit in this. I have watched the video where these doctors are sitting there discussing that, and it's like, should we do anything? Well, yeah, but if we research it, people might think that transitioning children's a bad idea. Well, liver cancer seems to be a pretty bad idea to me. I live with type 2 diabetes. I now know that my obesity, as well as my taking testosterone, played a factor in my developing type 2 diabetes. Like, it greatly multiplied the likelihood. And yet that's not something that was even suggested when I started transitioning. What the doctor said at that time was the WPATH line, which was, well, half the human population is on testosterone, so it really shouldn't be any different. You'll have the same risks as any other man out there. No, every cell in my body was designed at conception, determined by my DNA, that it wants to run under a very specific hormonal bath. I say determined by your DNA because everyone's DNA is different, and you get your differences in sexual development that's all DNA. So changing that is like burning gasoline in a diesel engine. The cellular metabolism is running at the wrong speed. Men who take estrogen, it's devastating to their emotional health, because your brain is designed to operate under a very specific hormonal bath. When you've got those neurons under the wrong hormonal bath, they're burning at the wrong speed. It's why these men are so incredibly emotive, and they can just be explosive in their rage and in their upset and in their self-righteous justification of the things that they do, because they feel their emotions so much more intensely and differently.
Kelly, I want to play you a video that was sent to me today.
Ooh.
And this is, we're not going to play the whole thing here. It's 3 minutes long, but this person, who is obviously a man dressed up as a woman, is following a woman around based upon some slight that this woman who's got the camera did to this guy. So I'm going to play this video for you, and I'm going to ask you about it in just a little bit. Here we go here.
Walk into me like that.
You're looking for problems and you're purposely
Am I?
antagonizing me.
Am I?
So I'm gonna give you a minute and then I'm gonna call the cops. Because you're You was going in that direction, and now you're following me to this location,
Because you,
and I'm
you
gonna stand
walked
here
into
for
me,
1 minute.
You antagonized me.
Okay, what's
and
your
you're,
name?
You're a black woman calling a
What's
cops
your
on a
name?
trans woman, and I just want you to
What's
think.
your name?
I want you to think about that.
Okay,
You're a black woman calling the cops
Go ahead.
on a trans
Go,
woman.
continue to walk.
And I want you to think about that.
We're at 37
and
seconds.
I'm going to pray for you.
I'm going to hang.
Because I
I'm going to
pray-
stop recording at 1 minute, and I'm going to call the cops if you're still in my area. I haven't offended you in any
hit
way.
me on the sidewalk
and you're
with your
following
body.
me.
You hit me.
Honey.
It's
What-
not honey
Okay.
anymore, bitch. It's not
Oh.
honey.
All right.
It's not honey, bitch.
We're just going to patiently wait for the cops.
Yes, we are.
This is getting.
You're a hypocrite.
It's
You're a
getting a
liberal
little bit
hypocrite.
more
and
aggressive.
You're a bitch.
Okay, so we don't need to see any more of that.
Yeah.
Mental illness, Kelly. I mean, you were just talking about that, and I thought, wow, what a great time to play this. Is every male who takes estrogen affected mentally this way? That they feel, and I'm sure there's more to it than, a case of whatever psychosis this person has. Maybe they feel empowered by their community, and maybe they feel empowered by all of these new laws and rules that are being established by certain states and provinces and governments, federal, provincial, in Canada. What is behind this kind of behavior, this emboldenment in the last few years especially?
The affirmations model, the social justice warrior, right? Everybody is a social justice warrior. Your life is your advocacy. Being a trans person is stunning and brave. And you're constantly being told that by doing this, you're making it better for the youth who are coming up behind you. You're creating a wider path. You're making it safer. And I lack the words to describe it just changes your entire experience of your emotional landscape. So you have a man who's been grown up. I mean, men and women are different. Okay? Boys used to be raised to be secure in, how am I even trying to say this? But
No, I know what you're saying. I mean, like in the last.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it in such a way that people who are listening can understand. But boys are raised to be leaders, right?
Some, sure.
So you take that and you just dial up to 100 the emotional intensity of it. Because remember that when women watch a movie like Thelma and Louise, we cry at the emotional scenes, right? When men watch Saving Private Ryan, you cry about the male bonding. The things that move you to tears are very different. So you've got this person, now he's in the emotional stuff. So when he feels self-righteous justification, he feels that ramped up like 100-fold. That's just dialed right up. So his intensity of feeling justified in what he's doing is dialed up beyond his ability to regulate it, because his brain was never meant to experience his emotional landscape the way he's experiencing it under the influence of estrogen.
Wow. And there's so many other societal factors in play here as well, probably perpetrated by government and then large corporations, maybe George Soros. I'm not exactly sure who would be behind this kind of thing. When they talk about toxic masculinity, that to me, what was it, 10 or 12 years ago, they came with toxic masculinity. It was such a big thing, designed to create a generation of beta boys. Right?
Yes.
And it's funny, when I walk around today, and I'm only talking about my lived experiences because I don't have any statistics in front of me, but what I see amongst younger people today, and just, anywhere I go, is there's a lot of boys out there who are not very masculine at all. And really the only masculine young men that I see in my neighborhood anyway are immigrants from the
Yes.
Middle East mostly.
Yeah.
And that to me is crazy. I mean, it's probably we're probably this close to getting rid of things like hockey and football if this keeps up.
Yeah.
So you said that you realized when you went back to doing long haul trucking the differences between men and women. How did you realize that as you spent more time with men?
Oh, yeah. I was like, for the most part, the only woman that, I mean, the guys I was working with didn't realize I was a woman, but I worked for a company called Titan Transport. It doesn't exist anymore. So I was the only female quite often driving there. The other thing that happened was I would see other women on testosterone working there, and I would see to the degree to which they just couldn't figure out how to fit in an like outside of the university complex. They're in this all male environment and they're drowning within it. I had two coworkers. The one was in her early 30s, and so she presents as this heterosexual male, and she goes to the female boss and complains that the mechanic in a flat deck trucking fleet of 50 trucks has a Sports Illustrated calendar up in the mechanics room. And she couldn't understand why her colleagues were just flabbergasted that she had made the complaint. And she also couldn't understand why, when she was assured that her complaint would be anonymous, everybody figured out it was her. So it was things like this that just really drove home to me how men are different, because a man in that situation would have gone directly to the mechanic, Ron, and said something. That's how men handle if they find a man has behaved inappropriately.
Yeah. We handle it amongst ourselves.
Each other. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Men very much police the behavior of other men in a situation like that. Like if a guy was upset with how one of the drivers behaved towards his wife, or mostly it was towards his daughter, because we're talking a career where most people are in their 50s to 60s. So generally it was daughters in their 20s to 30s. They didn't appreciate how a driver treated her. They would go directly to the driver and tell him that, because that's how men handle stuff like this, right?
So where are the men now when we need them the most to stand up against all of the nonsense that's going on in the world right now? It seems to me, and there's many men that I've spoken to in the last few years about this very thing. And they're going, if anybody's going to save us, it's going to be the women. But really, men should be standing up and trying to protect their wives and their children as much as possible, and yet they don't seem to be there. What the hell's going on?
Some men are standing up. There's become a very popular bumper sticker down in the United States. I've seen a couple copies of it now. It's some version of, if you follow my daughter or wife into the woman's bathroom, you're going to need this bathroom. But it's just basically saying that we see you. And there's some video clips that start coming out where men are actually telling these men they're talking to the men on estrogen, going, yeah, no, sorry, you cannot go in there. And it's being visible and telling them in public that you can't do that. And stepping into the willingness to be called, whatever names you're going to get called.
Yeah, you gotta be ready for that. You gotta be ready for that alphabet army that's going to come after you, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you as well. Like, how well organized really is that trans Tifa army? And how many of them are there?
They are well funded in Canada by the federal government. Faye Johnstone is one of the ringleaders. He operates, I believe he's physically in Ontario. Um, they are
Didn't he win the
starting.
women? He won the Woman of the Year award in Regina last year, I think. I
Was that,
remember seeing that post on X, and I just said, "You're a dude.
yeah, yeah.
You're a
I, I,
dude."
I can't follow some of the stuff too closely because I'll just get too tied up and responsive with it emotionally. But yeah, he won something here in Canada that was specific for women.
Yeah.
But they are also starting to lose control of their followers because Faya specifically told his followers to that they got. I'm trying to remember exactly how he worded it. I'm paraphrasing it here, but we have to stop being so. We have to stop assaulting people in our non-violent counter protests because the average individual is starting to see us as violent. We're losing ground with the general public because they're seeing us as the problem.
But when
Well,
you say they're well funded by the federal government, and I'm sure there's money coming in from other sources also, what are their tactics aside from online haranguing and all of that, and the counter protests? Like, what else will they target? Businesses? Will they target individuals?
they'll target individuals. They'll target businesses. The woman on Vancouver Island, it was 2 years ago now. She turned in a convicted sex offender who had been identifying as a woman, accessing the women and children's change room at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center. That mother is still being targeted by trans activists on Vancouver Island. And
I
it's
remember
2 years
that.
later. And it has come out that the man in question was known to the police as having a history of sex offenses against women and children. So, why weren't the staff at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center charged with aiding and abetting a known sex offender? That's my biggest question in all of that. None of the staff have ever faced anything. And yet, the mom, there was months where she was wondering if she was going to get charged with a hate crime
Yeah,
before the
and
police finally admitted that no, we can't charge you with a hate crime because he actually did have a record.
well, yeah, but I mean, you were seeing people who spin out on those rainbow sidewalks with their cars getting charged with hate crimes these days. Even though it's very difficult to prove motive in that. Let me ask you, how was your life when you were a man, or when you were pretending to be one?
I miss the emotional regulation of testosterone. I always felt like I was going to be exposed. There was always the fear that if I let people get too close to me, then they're going to know what my secret is, and it will change how they see me. I was very much isolated. I was a long haul trucker. I drove 160,000 plus miles a year. I was on the road. I hid in my truck.
Were
I
you
didn't
accepted
hang
by your
around
coworkers,
people.
though? Were you accepted by your peers as a man?
I was seen as male, yeah. I should have sent you some pictures to pop up.
No, I saw some on Facebook. You had a pretty good beard going, and
Yeah.
I was actually fairly impressed that you looked like you could pull it off pretty well. But that's after years of testosterone and whatever else you were ingesting, and of course the hysterectomy and all of those things that would contribute to that, right?
Well, everything about secondary sex characteristics is carried on the X chromosome. And as a woman, I had two of them, so there was two metabolic pathways for my body to respond to testosterone. So coming off of it was like I ended up with compression fractures in my lower back because my body responded to the absence of the testosterone as intensely as it responded to the presence of it. Um, so it was very much a life of hiding and half truths and evasions and like how do I tell this story without people thinking I'm weird. Like, I never really talked about the first guy I ever dated, but I talked about the women I dated, because I did live in same-sex relationships for over 20 years, like various relationships. But so it was a constant editing of my story and never really getting very close to anyone.
Because they would find out for sure if they saw certain things or.
Well, stuff confused them about me. Like, I remember having one conversation with the guys. We were hauling oversized loads, and they all had to be at the same place, same time for unloading, because there was specialized equipment to unload them. So we travel together in a pack when you do that, just permits, and it works out better that way. So when we were laid over for the weekend, we were all having dinner together. And the one guy asked me, so, Ken, who are you attracted to? Because you talk about having dated women, and yet when I see women flirt with you, you act as if you have no idea what's going on whatsoever. And there had been a woman at work who had been interested in dating me, and I just kind of pretended I didn't notice. They're like, are you into guys? Are you into girls? We're just curious because we want to know, like, if we're going to point out someone to you, we want to make sure you're interested. But I confused them, right? So that was something that's just one example, but there were things where my responses to, like, my coworkers were terrified of my temper because they'd never seen me get upset about anything. So they were like, if you.
So one of these days he's going to blow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right? Because that's how a guy in my situation would be. They would be like, you're all calm until you blow, right? But being a woman, it was because the testosterone just kind of changed the way I was with my emotions. So it changed the way I expressed myself. It changed the way I was expressing my emotions. So these things about me that confused them were the difference between my female socialization and how I behaved under the influence of testosterone, which is totally different than how a guy would have behaved, right?
So how's your transition back been? Is it been better than the first transition?
There's
Easier?
been a lot more tears.
Come on, you're a woman.
I was writing my mentor an email going, I don't know what it feels like to be a woman. I know I am a woman. I know God created me as a woman. I know this is good, but I don't know who I want to be female. I don't know if I like female. What's the femininity? How am I female? I want uncomplicated. Women are not uncomplicated, And I showed the email to a friend of mine, and she's like, yeah, welcome back.
I was talking to a friend. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Women feel like 1,000 things about one thing, where guys just aren't like that, right?
Well, there's been so many books written. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I said, there's a reason those books, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and all of the follow-up books were so successful because they're true. I mean, I told her, I said, I've gone out with so many women in my life, some serious relationships, some not so much, some just one-night stands when I was much younger, and I've never been able to anticipate, not even with a woman I've known for years, what they're going to, not 100%, what they're going to say or how they're going to respond to something that might be a little bit touchy. You never know what you're going to get. You're walking on eggshells. You don't know, right? And so you really try to finesse your way around something like that. And that's something that I never worried about with my buddies, like my dude buddies. Exactly. Hey, man, like, what's that on your shirt? You say whatever you're going to say. I mean, the locker room humor, right? That's what dudes are all about. And I think we got to make a comeback at some point soon.
Well, I have very much recently had that feeling that men do not come with warning labels or instruction manuals. because I'm starting to appear feminine now. So guys are interacting with me as they would a woman.
Right.
And this one apparently found me attractive, but I'm having this, what seemed like a normal conversation with this dude. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, he drops in this little bomb that, yeah, and I really enjoy spooning. I can be the big spoon or the little spoon, but I just thought I'd let you know that I really enjoy that. And I'm like, huh?
What?
Yeah. I'm like, what did
What are
just
you talking
drop that
about?
in the middle of this conversation? What are you talking about? But apparently, the guy thought I was good looking, so he was like, and anyhow, it's like guys are very much different than women. And what, yeah.
Kelly, how long is this going to take? I mean, because you just said I'm starting to appear feminine now. Is it a process, like all of these drugs and therapies have to be removed from your system? Does it take a long time, or is it something that you can count on happening sooner?
I've been doing a lot of fasting this year, which is accelerating the rate at which my body responds to the estrogen. Normally, it's a 5-year process where the body is completely able to respond to the natural hormonal bath that it's supposed to be under. And then I will eventually have to deal with the beard that I grew. Like I'll do the laser therapy, but that's like $2,000 to $3,000 to take care of the beard. So for the average individual, it's about 5 years before they fully look like their own gender, because it's about that long going the other direction. They call it fat shifts in the trans lexicon, because it's literally the body shifting how it carries the fat in response to the hormones. Yeah.
So, have you had difficulty during this period? People kind of looking at you going, I don't know how to address you, or yeah,
totally. And very much early on in the situation, I made the decision to use female spaces because, like, the Cowichan incident happened, and it was before that. I was talking with my friend Erin Kimberly, but women who've been on testosterone, we need to reclaim women's spaces, because the only way we can offer people protection from transphobia accusations is by occupying those spaces and going, we as women have a right to be in these spaces, and we are in these spaces. And men, we need to make it safe for those men to be in men's spaces where men can police their male sexual aggression and behaviors.
yeah.
Because women cannot police a man's, well, that clip you showed us, right, where it appears that whatever, probably a slight bump, and the guy goes all off on the woman about it, right, because he could, and he had this sense of entitlement where he felt he could stop and accuse her of whatever. It looked more like inattention than anything else. So men can police the behavior of other men, because you know what? When I used a man's bathroom, I went into the cubicle, did what I had to do, washed my hands, and left. That's how men behave in men's bathrooms. Men do not go into a man's bathroom, sit in the cubicle with the door wide open, and expose themselves or masturbate or any of the stuff that these men are doing in women's bathrooms. Men do not go around in men's change rooms with erections pointing it at people. Like, that's just not what gets done. That's not allowed.
It's not cool, man.
If a guy does that, exactly, that's the comment he's going to get from other guys.
Like, you stand next to a guy at a urinal, like let's say there's 6 urinals all next to each other, and there's one guy standing at a urinal. You walk up to the one right next to him, he's going to look at you funny. No guy would even do that, ever. You're at the furthest one you can get to. Right? You're never going to stand next to a guy when there's other urinals to use. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. But I guess women wouldn't know that. Women who have transitioned or tried to transition into a man wouldn't understand the way men operate, the way men think, and vice versa. It's a, there's something we talked about yesterday, and maybe we can get into this on another show in the next week or two. You can bring your friend on too. I'd like to have her on as well. We talk about the Marxist aspect of all of this.
Yeah.
Because that is something that's also, I mean, the Black Lives Matter people admitted to it on their website a few years ago. We're trained Marxists. And I believe that filters down into all of these critical theory groups, all of these victim groups, where, they use social Marxism on people. And that's what the cancellation movement, I suppose, is all about. We're going to cancel you. We're going to make you lose your job. We're going to make you lose your social media. We're going to make you lose your family. We're going to do all that. That's something I'd like to talk about as well. But I want to ask you, before we wrap it up for tonight, and guys, if you're all access members, we've still got way more to cover in the extension coming up on shadowdavis.com in just a few minutes. You are very well steeped in the knowledge of how this movement works from the time you spent in it. And I believe that Vancouver, BC, the Lower Mainland, is probably the capital of it, at least in Canada.
Yes, Trans-Canada.
Is there a way that we can dismantle this movement and get it out of the social lexicon?
I believe one of the things we can do is to attempt to defend the existence of sex. That's why what's called Referendum 2024. So in British Columbia, they're taking the category of gender on birth certificates, and they're saying that the category of gender will be tracked under the category of sex. And this is how it's going to be reported on the birth certificates. So they're eliminating sex and turning this gender identity thing into sex. So the first step in that is we're working on sending a letter to BC Vital Stats saying, don't do that. Gender identity was added to the Human Rights Code under a completely separate category than sex. Therefore, however you're going to track gender, you need to keep it completely separate from sex. We understand that historically, because these two things didn't exist, that isn't how it was done. However, we now have these two categories, and you need to figure out a way as a province of tracking those two things separately. We compare gender identity to religious status and say that if you're going to track it, you should track it the same way you would a religious status, because gender identity, like religion, can change over a person's lifestyle. Sex, you're born with that, and it remains stable throughout your entire life. Like race, you are born a member of a specific race or a racial, like I'm Norwegian and Scottish, I've got some Russian in my Norwegian, like it's mixed, but that racial mix I will be with for my entire life. So we're saying that sex is the same as race. So
what about removing the funding? I mean, like you say that these groups and social organizations are funded by the federal government. What happened? And I'm not sure how much, probably in the millions of dollars, but if you remove the funding, what happens then?
Well, like anything else, it would start to collapse. Unfortunately, the way the government is doing it is through the Two-Spirit. So they're saying that if you promote the Two-Spirit ideology, therefore you can access the funding. So they're tying it to so many different areas, and it's just slowly saturating out that we really need to change a government to affect the government funding. The other thing we are attempting to do through the Parents' Rights Coalition is to, or no, it's not the Parents' Rights Coalition. So they're attempting to apply for the funding and get the specific rejection that we're rejecting you because you are a same-sex. You define same-sex attraction, so you define homosexuality based on biology. And homosexuality is no longer, well, that's transphobic. To define homosexuality based on biology is now transphobic in Canada, right?
Oh my God! You see, that's the problem, right? You're a transphobe. And let me ask you this, because you spent a great many years involved in this on the other side of things. I don't want to say that you were fully indoctrinated into this. Maybe you were. I don't know. We haven't really covered that. But how do those people see us?
As dangerous, as insane, as threatening the health care of a vulnerable and marginalized population. My very existence as a detransitioner threatens the health care of trans people in Canada. I was told that by a medical doctor. So my question that I asked today, because I thought about that for several months, when my uncle died of cancer, nobody said, you can't talk about that because you're going to threaten people's access to chemotherapy. You know, if you talk about dying of cancer, people are going to be accessing chemotherapy. So if that conversation is crazy, it should be equally crazy to tell a detransitioner they can't talk about transition regret.
But nothing makes sense in that movement, as you know. I mean, you know, it's funny. I think Ben Shapiro had this one of these conversations with one of those folks. You know how he does it, right? Like at a university presentation, and she said, "Well, Ben said to her, hey, how come I can't identify as black?" And she looked at him like he had three heads, and she said to him, "Well, because you weren't born black." And her simple answer back to him said, well, you're born a woman. How come you can identify as a man and yet I can't identify as black? How is that fair? And what if somebody decides they want to identify as an alligator or a shoe or a sink?
And yet,
who's to stop them?
2004, the support group I went to was called FTM, etc. Female to male. So it was recognized that I was born female. In 2004, under the diagnostic criteria that existed at the time, had I not been able to say to the surgery readiness assessors that I was born female, I would not have been approved for surgery. And yet, we now have these crazy people. Sorry, Lord. We now have these individuals saying that I was born in the wrong body. I've always been female, but my body was born, like there was some sort of a translocation soul error that went on. And my soul accidentally got put into a boy body, and then I, popped out of mom's womb. I was like, you couldn't fix the mistake.
You can believe in God when it's convenient, I suppose, right?
Yeah, completely.
Kelly, thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate this. And I would like to cover, like, I'm not kidding here when I say I want to cover that whole Marxist thing that we talked about yesterday in another show in the next couple of weeks. If you have the time, I would love to do that.
Okay, yeah, I will get Melanie to connect with you. She's very
I think she already did on X, so I'll reach out to her as well. Thank you, Kelly. Have a great night and a great weekend coming up.
Okay, thank you so much, Shadow.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
There is Kelly Pirie from DetransallianceCanada.com. You can find out more about what they're doing again on the website. DetransallianceCanada.com is the place to go. Let me throw it up on the screen here for you guys so you can see. DetransallianceCanada.com. We still have so much more to cover on the extension tonight, including Alberta's updated Bill of Rights. It's going to include the right to refuse vaccination, if you can believe it. We have an update on the Coots 2 trial. It's supposed to be wrapping up next Tuesday night. Pierre Poilievre once again had it out with the media in London, Ontario today. Montreal, there was a traffic sign hijacking of a Palestinian protest group. It's kind of a funny story, actually. Dan Bongino talks about how big tech is scrubbing Kamala Harris's complete record from the internet, which apparently they started doing late last night, and they're doing it today. You can hardly find anything about what Kamala Harris has done in politics online unless you go really, really, really deep, and they know that most people don't have the patience for that. All that is coming up for All Access members on the extension in just a couple of minutes. For those of you who will not be joining us there, and I really wish you would, it's not that expensive to come and join the club at shadowdavis.com, SHADOEDAVAS.com. I will catch you on Monday night. Well, actually, we'll catch you for a bit on Sunday night because we're doing the Sunday night show for a half an hour now live on socials, and then we go to the All Access for the extension. So we'll catch you Sunday night at 8 o'clock for the next Shadow at Night live stream. Love you all. Appreciate you all. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.